Since ages have passed, humans observe the stars at night. When consulting scientific cultural history, we find proof in ancient societies and their arts that mankind has always been tremendously impressed by starlight. But how come the stars have ever been of such importance to humans, as in the present era we only see a handful of them cast on a grayscale night scenery? Sadly enough, nowadays we only get to see little of stars at night, not because there is clouds or bad weather whatsoever, but rather a huge obstacle deprives us of starlight that has gradually grown in our communities. This obstacle is called light pollution. What is light pollution? It is the enormous luxury of way too much artificial light at night that literally swallows stars. And that truly is a tragedy with substantial impact on mankind. But let me explain this step by step and allow me to introduce you to the majesty of starlight, as well its cultural significance in the beginning and its scientific impact later on in this journey. Let us assume we're some 2,000 years back in time. Member of a caravan perhaps that has already settled for the night to take a decent rest before the travel continues the next day. What you get to see here is a beautiful landscape scenery at night that you most likely will not have experienced before so easily. You see, there are already countless stars in the sky as the sun has set and the night is on. But isn't there some sort of light smog in front of us? No, it is not. It is the very faint and subtle glare of sun's light being reflected on the interplanetary dust particles. We call this the zodiacal light. You could address this light as a greeting of the sun, also a sort of reassurance that the sun, even though it has vanished, is still there, comforting us by saying, "I'll be back in the morning, don't you worry." On top of the zodiacal light, there appears to be a very bright star, but it is not. It is the light of two planets, only appearing as one, since they are co-located by celestial mechanics. It is Jupiter and Saturn in a tight so-called large conjunction. Doesn't it look a bit like a comet? And as all this happened to occur while these two major planets wandered through the zodiacal constellation Pisces, it might dawn to you that we are talking about a very peculiar date back in ancient times. The time when Jesus was given birth into this world. This is not going to be a Bible lesson, but still, when we consult this book, we find an interesting line in Matthew that goes like, "The star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was." This indicates the three kings set their heading in confidence and in alignment to the starry light to find orientation. This story is just supposed to display mankind's confidence and trust in the natural light at night, by which they found orientation. Considering the northern star for orientation, or Sirius, will make this a bit more clear. When Sirius displayed its so-called heliacal ascent, it indicated to the ancient Egyptians that it was about time to gather agricultural workers, as the river Nile would soon spill over its brim, appear in a much larger scale, pouring its fruitful mud on the ground, providing nutrition to the plants that were supposed to be poked into the soil, drawn, and harvested later on. Stars used to be a functioning calendar for those people. And this is another aspect of stars, their constancy in appearance. As starlight neglects races, nations, and languages of those who look up to them, there is no discrimination from the stars, as they keep shining in majestic brightness and luminosity to everyone on the earth gazing up to them. no matter what language they speak, what beliefs they might cultivate, or whatever citizenship they might hold. Comprehending this, humans realized stars would ideally serve as a sort of transportation medium for the stories they found worthwhile being told all over the places of their culture. And those stories comprise of interhuman relationships, behavior, and tradition. Those stories have been collected and transformed into what is called mythology. The ancient people called the Chaldea a society who became the first ever to utilize the stellar constellations for displaying their insights in human psychological performance. They pinned their psychological knowledge in form of stories on the stars and constellations as they knew. These would constantly rise and just be visible on the celestial stage every night and therefore be available as a sort of psychological map that can be used instead of writing and drawing, making remembering the content much easier. Perhaps you wonder, how come the name Milky Way? What's the origin of this name and of this peculiar galaxy housing the solar system we live in? Here is a couple depictions that will explain how come. See here Zeus and Hera, his wife. They were supreme royals in the ancient Greece mythology, governing all the gods as well as the humans they created. Zeus was well renowned for being quite reproductive, not only with his wife Hera, but also with all his lovers. One day, birth was given to this nice boy, an illegal son of Zeus. When Hera heard about, she has gotten so furious she would send assassins to kill the little boy, demonstrated here as huge snakes. But when taking a close look into the face, we won't find fear. Rather than Hercules, as he was called, just wondered how firmly he would have to grab the snake's throat to end its life. How could a merely 2-year-old boy be so powerful? Well, Jacopo Tintoretto explains it in this depiction. Every time Hera held her beauty sleep around noon, Hercules was placed at her breast, nourishing the boy with divine mother milk. This went well for a while, until the very day when Hercules sucked so fiercely that she woke up. When she found that bastard, she pushed him away immediately and cried out her detest. But when pushing him away, some of her divine milk spilled off and was distributed on the night sky, creating the Milky Way. This is not perfectly an evidence-based derivation of the origin of the galaxy we live in, but again, it shows how tightly mankind was linked with the stars and over a very long period was absolutely in sync with nature. The stars bestowed epistemes, and people loved to look up to them, as they found their gods in the stars, emphasizing their faith. Today's situation, of course, looks very different. There is almost no stars available, caused by the exceedingly habit of modern societies to light up all their cities and communities with artificial light. Therefore, we lose contact with nature at night. So, we have lost the stars. And we have also lost the source of faith, or perhaps we should say we have shifted such source to smartphones, bank accounts, and so forth. But why should this be a problem for us? In order to answer this thoroughly, let me first show you how we form epistemes nowadays. This is Chile, EO's beloved playground for astronomical scientific observation of the celestial nights. ESO is the congregation of almost half of the nations of the European Union, having strong confidence in the commitment of investigating starlight on a scientific level and holding the fingers on the pulse of evidence-based astronomical science in real time. There is no artificial light at night throughout the vastness of this colorful and beautiful country, in an area that expands over a couple hundred square kilometers to make sure no one ever will erect sources of artificial light at any place whatsoever. In 2011, I was invited as an astrophotographer and as a storyteller to come and see myself the most sophisticated place of such science. I loved those roughly 3 weeks so much and spent every night underneath the stars. I felt like being covered with a starry blanket, and I felt as snug as a bug amongst them, as the very dry atmosphere in Chile let the starlight shine so brightly that they appeared right next to me, like I could literally just grasp for them. Let me report that the luminosity of the Milky Way, when it was in the zenith, that is, right above our heads, was so strong and huge in brightness that our bodies would cast shadows on the ground of the observing platform. I was in awe, I can tell you. No light pollution whatsoever, only natural light at night was the only source, and yet I could easily find directions and orientation. It was one of the most tremendous and inspiring experiences ever in my life. So here is how astronomical science is being done today. Modern advanced astronomical science utilizes not only earthbound observatories, but also many space telescopes, of which only some are very popular. And besides the European Southern Observatory, there is many more organizations around the globe whose intention is just the same, to investigate the light of the stars in order to learn how the universe works. This equipment is capable of operating along the entire electromagnetic spectrum, but this means we can penetrate dark dust, for example, in order to find out what's going within or behind such dense molecular clouds. In Orion's nebula, for instance, stellar nurseries are being revealed, and we are literally witnessing when birth is given to young stars. This happens throughout the entire universe at almost all places we look at, like such huge molecular star-forming regions. Matter that wasn't necessary to create a star serves as material to form planets. Thus, around stars, we observe the formation of planets. Stars should be considered as cosmic factories, receiving the order from the universe, go ahead and create heavy elements out of a credit of hydrogen. By means of nuclear fusion, stars transform hydrogen into heavier elements that are needed when the universe wants to come up with solid planets. Or in other words, all the elements in our bodies, oxygen in the blood, magnesium in the muscles, carbon in the bones, once were created in cosmic factories. Utilizing the laws of nuclear fusion, stars are capable to administer in their core region. It's just like the great cosmologist Carl Sagan once said, "We are made of stardust." Once a star finishes production, it steps ahead in its metabolism to develop a state that allows to share the exploit of fusion that it created over millions of years with the universe. This process runs in a gigantic explosion called a nova, supernova, or maybe even a hypernova. All the elements are being cast in outer space at tremendous speed and render the material needed to create new stellar systems. And hovering around the central stars of such systems, the planets, those stars are responsible for. So we truly can comprehend this process as a sort of cosmic recycling. Everything we know about the universe, the cosmos and its laws, we owe to the light of stars. A starlight really should be considered as an ambassador of remote worlds. Those very remote worlds are full of fascinating stories. And even though the information that is brought to us is really old, like millions and even billions of years, it contains everything we need to gather in order to understand and comprehend how the universe works, how it ticks, and how it runs space, time, and matter as we know of. Or in other words, looking up to the stars is looking back in history, and yet condensing the information into brand new insights on how cosmos works. Wrapping this up so far, we can easily realize now starlight is an ambassador of remote worlds, and it bestows our episteme. Here is a nice animation created by the Max Planck Institute. It displays the contribution of the entire matter throughout the cosmos, visualizing mankind's episteme of the universe. What you see is those mere 14 billions of years containing everything we have imaged, analyzed, measured, and categorized. But it's only 4% of the universe, as the remaining 96 have not been revealed yet and not understood at all. Some 100 years ago, one could observe the abundance of starry nights almost anywhere. That was way before artificial light at night came into play. In the beginning, it was quite expensive to illuminate streets and buildings, but over time, this has changed dramatically. Nowadays, artificial light at night costs 0.01% of what it did those days back. And ever since it has gotten cheaper to illuminate, it has gotten more common to do that. When speaking to decision makers of communities, how come there is always more and more of such artificial light? The answer always was more or less the same. When neighboring communities shine on their towers of churches, for example, with 500 watts, then we do it with 750, yielding a competition of artificial light. When understanding that modern societies are fearful societies, one can comprehend why there is a subjective need for more light at night. Consulting official public security, however, you learn the opposite. Individual subjective sense of safety at night is a complete different pair of shoes than objectifiable safety. Public safety tells us they have the same problem with light pollution as we astronomers do. So when you get to see these two images, you see one at the same constellation. To the left, it has been imaged outside of a town with a standard camera on a tripod. On the right-hand side, you see the same constellation, Orion, imaged with the same camera, the same exposure time on the tripod through the atmosphere of a city. Where is all the light of the stars gone? Well, it's gone with the artificial light. From a more scientific perspective, we find light pollution to compromise our society in three major ways: the ecology, economics, and health. And let me also add a fourth aspect in advance, which is widely underestimated, because there is a cultural aspect of light pollution, which I call an amputation injury. From an ecological standpoint, we know night active fauna is severely disturbed and compromised. From an economical standpoint, we monitor the waste of energy and therefore money for producing light that brings zero benefit to anyone, but rather delivers huge loss of resources, power, and energy. From the standpoint of health, we know that in a room you are supposed to sleep restfully, you won't, as light pollution will perturbate such healthy sleep. This is due to the lack of production of melatonin in the pineal gland of the brain. Especially light that holds the better portion of white and or blue will block the production. Melatonin, however, is a member of the circadian rhythm and essentially as well as substantially involved in maintaining a strong immune system that keeps working at its best performance for the individual. But it won't once the individual is exposed to artificial light at night. And also melatonin provides the individual with dreams for psychological restoration. Light pollution disrupts the circadian rhythm in humans. From a cultural aspect, we need to consider light pollution as a gate that shuts down the access to natural starlight that, as we have seen before, is the glorious provider of a vast perspective in outer space. It helps us to breathe deeply, and it enables us to think real big. Calling light pollution an amputation injury needs to be explained. We are shrinking our visual view from millions of light years down to a miserable portion of the entirety of nature, us as a nation, a city, or even a person that is no longer capable to gaze at the stars and be inspired to create an episteme. We are no longer able to listen to the stories being told by the ambassador starlight and to learn from it. So this is why I see us suffer from an amputation injury as a culture. As we cut ourselves out of the natural environment and the continuum that served our ancestors over ages to inspire them and help them create their episteme, their better understanding of the universe. We can be curious how future epistemes will look like in a rising next generation that grows up without being in contact with starry nature. Now, as we close the gate of perspective by polluting the atmosphere with outrageous amounts of light pollution that wastes energy and power, we run the risk of depriving ourselves to contact the universe, from which we have learned so many intriguing, enlightening scientific facts. The epistemes we have formed over thousands of years have been bestowed by the light of the stars. This light traveled millions and billions of years through space, just to be blocked away and swallowed up on the final approach to the Earth and its observers in the last 1,000 feet of an atmosphere that has been lightened up way too much, just because of not knowing it better, just because of fear, just because of ignorance. Once touch with nature is lost, you will not be able to establish a sane relationship. As there is no relationship between man and nature, as a consequence, responsibility for natural environment has no chance to grow in modern industrialized societies. Did you know that we only spend a handful of percent of daytime in nature? The majority of time we spend somewhere inside. So it is no wonder that man loses touch to nature. How much time is left for nature at night? Science categorizes humans as Homo sapiens. Sapiens stands for being wise. So let me ask you a couple questions. Is it wise to spend the majority of time inside rather than to encounter nature again? Is it wise to continue polluting the atmosphere with even more light pollution? Hasn't the turning point been reached, and shouldn't we reduce light pollution and ease down artificial light at night to a more sane volume again? Compared with pollution of air or water, where sophisticated items and equipment is needed, that is very demanding in terms of times bringing it up and also very expensive. Correcting light pollution is somewhat trivial. All you need could be called the trinity of correcting light pollution: awareness, a switch, and the will. It is not about taking away the light at night, but it is about time to realize there is a need for a more responsible way of using resources like energy and light, rather than to waste it and compromise life, natural environment, and health, and depriving the next generation of maintaining contact to the universe in order to broaden their perspective. So it is about time to realize we need to broaden our perspective again. We need to understand we're depending on natural environment as we are a member of nature. We simply need to encounter nature again and particularly the night and the light of the stars that will always shine for us in majestic luminosity and volume. If I had one wish to speak out today, it would be, please go ahead and walk the night. Gaze at the stars, become engaged with the stars, and let them inspire you to sense yourself being made of stardust.